I want to borrow a line from one of your competitors. He said, Ola to Ola hai, Chetak to Shola hai. तो Luna क्या है?
I would add to it that Luna chalti hai.
So you'll have driverless golf carts very soon.
We signed a joint venture with the Lamborghini family, the creators of automobile Lamborghini cars, which are very famous. If the world is going green, I feel that even transport has to go green.
Do you think India will always remain reliant on China?
Today, incidentally, half of India does not own a two-wheeler.
What are the biggest hurdles, bottlenecks towards adoption of electric vehicles in India?
We've sold close to 70 lakh Lunas.
A lot of people say कि अब EV industry का end होने वाला है.
India is racing towards an electric future.
India will start exporting electric vehicles to about 100 countries.
EV पावरिंग इंडिया. हम इस पॉडकास्ट में उन लोगों को बुलाते हैं जो EV इंडस्ट्री के पायोनियर्स हैं, अर्ली अडॉप्टर्स हैं. हमारी जो आज की गेस्ट हैं उनने 2014 में ही तय कर लिया था कि वो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स का बिजनेस बनाएंगी. अगर आप मेरी तरह 80s और 90s में बड़े हुए हैं तो आपने लूना का नाम तो ज़रूर सुना होगा. शायद इसको चलाया भी होगा या फिर किसी न किसी को चलाते हुए देखा होगा. लूना एक व्हीकल ही नहीं था, वो इंडिया की मिडिल क्लास के लिए एक मूवमेंट था. और हमारी जो आज की गेस्ट हैं उन्होंने इस मूवमेंट को रिवाइव किया है. हमारी आज की गेस्ट है सुलज्जा फिरोडिया मोटवानी फ्रॉम काइनेटिक. Sulajja, thank you very much for joining me today on my podcast, which is called EV Powering India. The idea behind this podcast is to call early adopters, pioneers of the EV industry, to discuss with them why did they back the EV sector, what was their hypothesis, did things work out the way they thought, or was it better, worse? And basic idea is that we want to inspire people to adopt EVs, but also we want to inspire young entrepreneurs to get into the EV sector as well. Right, so that's the basic thought behind the podcast. And generally, I start my podcast by asking everybody, all my guests, do you own an electric vehicle? So what's your answer?
So first of all, very happy to be here. Samir, you're doing wonderful work in this space, EV space. And I think this podcast is just another effort from you to really help the sector. So really appreciate it. Happy to be here. And of course, I own multiple EVs. I own my own e-Luna and an e-scooter. And I own an electric BMW car.
Wonderful. So what's your experience been so far with electric vehicles? Do you think they make good sense, both from an environment perspective, but also from an economic perspective?
Well, they say once you ride an e-vehicle, you can't go back to a non-e-vehicle. And I fell in love with an electric vehicle when I drove a Tesla 10 years ago. And in fact, that was one of the factors that inspired me to become an EV entrepreneur. I just loved it. The smoothness, the silent feel. You feel like you're in an airplane cabin. It's just a wonderful experience. And I think, therefore, I just love driving EVs. And I would encourage everyone to try one. I'm sure they'll love it.
Yeah. So I don't own an electric vehicle, but what I do is I always keep an electric two-wheeler in my house. So because we finance electric vehicles, we get a lot of vehicles for testing. So I always have one to test. So I like to ride it every day, really enjoy it. But I also think that electric vehicles, the big game is going to be in commercial adoption rather than personal adoption. Of course, it's good to have electric vehicles because this is, like you said, it's a very smooth ride, it's very quiet, it's comfortable, a lot of technology in the vehicles. But mera jo view hai, it is that from an economic perspective, also environment perspective, the bigger gain is when you adopt it in high utilization use cases.
So partly agree, partly disagree. Certainly EVs make a lot of sense for commercial use because their every rupee saved is every rupee earned. So if a rickshaw driver earns 1,000 or 1,200 rupees a day, but doesn't have to spend 300-400 rupees on petrol or diesel because electric is not charged, there's no fuel cost, then that is more earning for him to take home. So every rupee saved is every rupee earned. So it makes all the sense for commercial use. Plus you can have interesting models like battery swapping. You come back to your depot and swap your battery and run the vehicle on an unlimited mileage basis. So it makes a lot of sense there. But I do believe that EVs are now becoming mainstream also for personal use. You have countries like, Scandinavian countries where you have 80% EVs. You have China where more than 50% cars are electric. So I think EVs are also becoming mainstream. And I think in India, they will become mainstream in two-wheelers and three-wheelers first before they become mainstream in cars. In fact, I don't see any reason why anybody should buy a non-electric scooter.
Yeah.
Because an electric scooter gives you all the comfort, convenience, features of a petrol scooter, but no petrol cost. So I think EVs are going to be very popular for personal use, starting with two-wheelers, three-wheelers, buses, and eventually cars in India as well.
Yeah,
so
so I
they are
think-
going to be mainstream very soon.
I think that's interesting because I think when we talk about three-wheelers, already we see about maybe 60-65% of new three-wheeler sales are electric. But when we look at two-wheelers, that percentage is much lesser, maybe 10 to 15% today. So what's your thought, prediction in the next 2 years, 5 years? Where does the two-wheeler adoption will
I
it there?
think certainly we are at an inflection point. And I'll tell you why I feel so. Because now, in the beginning, it was the early adopters, the innovators, who started buying electric vehicles. That time, the electric vehicle models were also few. They were expensive because, they were mostly in the performance segment, let's call it that. So very few people who were the enthusiasts who could afford bought it. But now there are two things that are happening, very differently. First of all, you have many more EV models. For example, from House of Kinetic Green, we have models like the e-Luna, e-scooters, which are very affordable as well. Similarly, many other players have entered the EV space. Some of the legacy players have entered the EV space. So you have many more models at different price points, meeting different requirements of different segments. So people now see price parity. They don't have to pay a huge premium. If they're buying a non-electric scooter for, let's say, 90,000, they can get an equally good electric scooter just above that price.
Yeah.
So because price parity has come, I think that it's becoming a no-brainer in a decision. This is going to be a big turning point. Having more models to choose from, having good companies, not just unknown brands, but known established players like Kinetic. People have that confidence that, okay, these companies have been around. If I buy a vehicle from this company, I will get service, spare part, warranty support. I'm making the right decision. And the third is the intention to purchase. Now, I find that 2 years ago, it was few people who were considering EV. It was a novelty. But now I find that many people who are buying a new two-wheeler are thinking about electric. The intention to consider an electric vehicle has gone up drastically.
Yeah.
My yoga teacher, for example, wanted to buy a new scooter. She considered electric and petrol both, and she bought electric. The maid at my home, her husband wanted to buy a new two-wheeler. They considered electric. They went to the showroom, they checked it out.
Yeah.
So it shows to me that EVs are becoming mainstream. So I find that over the next 5 years, we'll see a massive inflection in two-wheelers. Segments that will lead this transition will be mopeds, or what you call the crossovers, because the customers are very price sensitive. Running cost is very important to them. EVs are going to cost them 10 paisa per kilometer vis-a-vis 1 rupee per kilometer for petrol. And the second segment is scooter, because this is all intracity. What might take a little longer time is the motorcycles, which are either urban rural commute products or performance oriented decision, where the vroom may be important to the college student. But scooters and products like e-Luna are going to become, I would say, 70-80% electric over the next 5 years.
70-80% electric over the next 5 years.
Scooters and mopeds. I'm 100%
Wonderful.
sure about this. Yeah.
There is a lot of, we talk to a lot of people, and these days, there's a view that's building that a lot of startups in the EV space, whether they were in manufacturing, fleet operation, battery manufacturing, etc., they're all shutting down. So, a lot of people say कि अब EV industry का end होने वाला है. And on the other hand, you're talking about 70-80% two-wheeler adoption in EVs. So I'm just thinking ki which of the narratives is going to win and why?
So I think it's the same narrative. If EVs are becoming mainstream, that means it is becoming now a serious game. Right? That means more and more people want to buy reliable, long-lasting products. So companies that can engineer vehicles. If I talk about OEMs first, then we'll talk about fleet operations. You have to have EV. Automobile is serious business, right? It is not like a software where you write a code and You can innovate, let's say, at the cerebral level. Automotive is also nuts and bolts, literally. So you have to continuously do R&D, engineer good products. You have to meet the regulation. You have to ensure safety. It's critical because your vehicles are being driven by people. Somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's wife, somebody's son are riding these products. Safety is absolutely critical. So engineering, build quality has to be very good. You have to develop supply chain. You have to do manufacturing on large scale. You have to distribute the vehicles, market your products, provide service, spare part, warranty, and the whole cycle repeats. So automotive and therefore EV, which adds another layer of innovation because now it's not just automotive, but it's new technology.
Yeah.
So finding the right solutions, making the right choices, working with the right partners, building the whole ecosystem is another layer of challenge, I would add. So I think that once EVs are becoming mainstream, now people who are in this space have to be people who are pedigreed, who are serious, who can handle this entire set of complex variables. So coming back to the same point that as EVs are becoming mainstream, it is the serious players, experienced players, the pedigreed companies who are able to manage the growth, ensure that they ride up the technology curve. It's no longer that you're importing some kits from China and assembling and selling at a low price. Now regulation has also moved. So good products, good quality, reliable, long-lasting, meeting regulation requirements are the kind of challenges, and the companies that can meet those challenges are the ones who are going to thrive. Those who try to just do some kind of a shortcut or assembly or not do real good R&D engineering and safety focused work, of course, they're going to see that the business models are not going to work. So yes, EVs are a great opportunity, but it is definitely serious business, and you have to have all the skills to be able to survive this game.
So big opportunity for the legacy players, not so much for startups.
I would not like to just say that. I would like to say that it is a definitely big opportunity for experienced and pedigree players who know what it is to run this complex business.
Yeah.
And startups who do it seriously with the right approach, with the long-term approach. That means not raise billions and burn billions and build a cash burn model, but necessarily focus on good R&D, engineering, create good products, and deliver value and service and a good experience to the customers. So I think to get the automotive EV game right, you have to focus on the consumer and do everything right to ensure that the customer is happy and your model is sustainable. So I think some startups who get this right definitely, will have a great opportunity. And this is only OEMs. There are so many other areas where there are opportunities. There is the whole EV ecosystem, charging infrastructure, swapping infrastructure. There's EV financing. There is EV components. There is, EV business models, which are software as a service, battery as a service. So
Fleet operations.
there's opportunity, fleet operations. There's opportunity everywhere. So I think it's a great time to enter this space and look at it as a long-term, serious opportunity and, get the nuts and bolts right.
So you spoke about pedigree. You grew up in the Firodia household. So just talk me through the early days, and I believe the first Luna, when it came out, probably was close to when you were born as well. So in some ways, I think the Luna and you grew up together. So just talk me through some of the early days, the discussions, the insights from the time.
So first of all, I'm extremely fortunate and very proud of the legacy of the family that I represent. In our family, it's always been about service to the nation and service to the society, much more than about business and profit. So the businesses and the products my grandfather and my father created, whether it was the commercial vehicles in Force Motors, whether it was the Kinetic Luna, the Kinetic Honda, these have been really life-changing products, for the consumers. They were important contribution to the mobility landscape of the country. And they, I think the DNA was always about bringing new technology, advanced technology, but at affordable prices. So it reaches the society. Even Kinetic Honda, when it came, was a very advanced product, but it was brought within the reach of middle class, and that's why it became so popular. So the vision was always to do something which will, take the society forward. Luna, in fact, Chal Mere Luna, of course, everybody still remembers it because that product gave mobility to, a whole generation.
Yes.
Today, people who started their life on the Luna are driving a Mercedes car. They've moved up in life, but they still love what Luna meant to them, And, it was a partner in their progress. So the discussions, of course, at home were very elevated. Unlike a typical business family household or a Marwadi family, which is considered to be very conservative, there was never any gossip on our dinner tables about, other family members or
Competition or anybody.
there was never any negative talk. It was always about the country, the progress, the society, the business. And, I loved growing up in that environment. Education was important and service to the nation was most important. Pride in your country, make in India.
Yeah.
Grew up with those values. And in my mind, I had no doubt that I want to be part of this, the Kinetic, umbrella, the experience. And I went to the US for my education, worked there for 5 years, but always wanted to come back home and be part of Kinetic. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm very fortunate that I could really learn from the kind of role models like my father and my grandfather.
And any childhood memories of visiting the Kinetic factory?
So I was my grandfather's favorite. He was called HK fondly, and I still meet people, hundreds of people, who say that, your grandfather gave me my first job. Your grandfather gave me my first order. Your grandfather gave me a loan with which I started a business. He was, a wonderful man. In fact, when he passed away, at that time, of course, Bajaj Auto, let's say, was a competitor to us. But the first person who came to our home was Rahul Bajaj, who had worked with my grandfather. We used to be partners in Bajaj Auto many years ago in the history of the group. And my grandfather kind of, I don't want to use the word trained, but mentored Rahul ji. And he was the first person who came to our home, and he said that your grandfather was God's good man. So I was very close to my grandfather. And when I was a little girl, maybe 6-7 year old, I used to go to office with him and I would doodle on his walls. And he would show everybody that my granddaughter has done this.
Yeah.
So I think it was the time that I spent with him that inspired me a lot. I remember that in the evening there would be a line of people outside the house, somebody coming to ask for loan, somebody coming to ask for home, somebody coming to ask for advice. And I would check through and I would see that. And that definitely was something that is my childhood memory, what I felt inspired. I felt that I also want to grow to be, of course, above all, a good human being, kind-hearted. I want to work for my country. I want to help people. And the fact that if you run a business, you're creating employment and opportunities is something that always remained with me. And I think just seeing him, what a great entrepreneur he was, was my inspiration always.
Wonderful. And also, I think through the journey of Kinetic, of course, there was the Luna legacy, but there were other partnerships as well, like the partnership with Honda. And I remember in my teenage days, Kinetic Honda was so popular, much more than Luna, because obviously in this urban setting, Kinetic Honda was more popular. So just talk a little bit about various life stages of Kinetic and the partnerships that were built, why they were built, how they worked.
Sure. So the focus was always make in India. And even when Luna was made in 1972, my father says that he started, he was in the US that time, and my grandfather called him and told him that, look, come back to India now because I want to make a moped. My father said, what is a moped? He said, you come, it's a common man's vehicle, and you come back and I will explain. And then he gave him 15 lakh rupees and said that this is a vehicle we have to create, which has to be made with all Indian components, no imported components, all Indian engineering, and it should be sold for 1,500 rupees. So this was the vision.
Yeah.
And so the make in India was, ingrained in the approach, and the DNA of the group has always been new technology at an affordable price. Now, in order to do something like this, you have to bring technology. So while you want to make in India, but if you tap the good players around the world who have already developed advanced technology, and then you are able to bring it to India and make it suitable for India, that was sort of the secret sauce, I would say. So the vision or the inspiration behind Luna was the Piaggio Ciao, which was a popular moped there in Italy. It was studied. My father worked there as well to understand. And then when we created Luna, it was then actually, bought by the Italians to see how you have made a vehicle which is so much cheaper than what we have made.
Yeah.
Runs with even kerosene adulterated and on bad Indian roads. So he understood the technology but made it suitable for India. Similarly, Honda came in to India in early 80s. Honda, of course, has been one of the world's large automotive franchises. They were looking for partners for scooters and for motorcycles. They tied up with the Hero Group for motorcycles and with the Firodia family for scooters, and Kinetic Honda was born. And then again, we brought the world's first gearless, it was Variomatic transmission, but people called it gearless. But the idea was Variomatic transmission, self-start scooter. Before that, scooters were kickstart, foot brake, and suitable only for men.
Yes.
And the wife would always be sitting behind. But when Kinetic came, it became the 16 to 61 bike. Anybody could ride it. It was advanced, it was fun, it was, loved, called Kine, Kaiho, Kinetic. People, it was like a friend.
Yeah.
And again, the juice was that we got Japanese technology, which we learned. Honda was a great partner. Not only the product, but even the processes. The reliability, what comes from the Japanese systems, is what Kinetic Honda could actually, we learned from, that angle as well. And the product was then made suitable for the Indian markets, whether it's ground clearance, whether it's fuel efficiency, whether it is the steel body. Typically scooters around the world have been plastic.
Yeah.
But Kinetic Honda was made with a new shape, but in steel body. And that's what the Indian market needed. The ground clearance was lifted. And there were many other changes that were made to make that base concept suitable for Indian market. And that's how it worked. In the group, we've also had a joint venture with Mercedes-Benz for commercial vehicles. And Force Motors now, which is run by my uncle, made the Traveller, which is even today India's best van.
Yeah.
And the engine is what we developed with Mercedes-Benz technology. It's the most reliable engine, in the whole diesel technology world. So these players gave us technology. We worked with them to learn it, but to make it suitable for Indian market. Now we have a JV with Hyundai as well for elevators and escalators. And we are bringing world-class elevators, to the Indian high-rises. That's another area where we've learned from a partnership. In EVs, of course, I have a very interesting partnership that we have created with the Lamborghini family. And we are going to create, for the first time, designed in Italy, EVs, but completely engineered and manufactured in India with Indian supply chain, but for the global markets. So again, now the learning is design we are bringing in from the partnership. Supply chain is local. The brand will be a global brand, Tonino Lamborghini, and sold to the most discerning customers around the world. So I think partnerships have helped us to learn and to imbibe something which is a new way, whether it's design, whether it's reliability, whether it's process, or in case of the Lamborghini JV, it is the global lifestyle. And then, it adds to the DNA and, we bring something which is life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luna came in the 70s, then your partnership with Honda came in the 80s, 90s. And I guess with time, your group probably saw a lot of change in consumer behavior as well. And these products that were so iconic, Luna, Kinetic Honda, don't operate at the moment. So just talk to me a little bit about what was the shift in the consumer behavior and what was the thinking of your group at that time?
Sure.
With these changes that were happening?
Sure. So Luna was, I would say, has been one of the world's highest sold two-wheelers.
Yeah.
And it became a, stellar success in let's say it came in the 70s, got established. 80s was when it was at the peak. We've sold close to 70 lakh Lunas, which imagine now we're talking about 70s and 80s, right? That time the market was much smaller.
Correct.
And it played a part in the society's progress. Later in the 90s, two things happened. One which you will surely appreciate is the change in the financing. Retail financing became the flavor. So you had banks like ICICI Bank, Citibank, HDFC Bank who jumped into automobile financing. So now financing was available for two-wheelers at affordable interest rates. And what that did was that people could upgrade from a Luna to now a scooter or a motorcycle, paying a little higher EMI. This happened along the time when cities were developing and rural areas were developing. So a part of the market, which was Luna's core market, moved to scooters, which was even to Kinetic Honda, for example, which was the families, the women. They found these gearless scooters to be a more convenient product, to take the kids to school, college. There was under seat storage. It seemed to be a little bit more stable and larger. And the rural customers shifted to motorcycles, who by paying a little bit more for EMI could upgrade. So Luna or the moped segment saw a loss of two critical customer segments. Also, more products came in the motorcycle space. So the market shifted from moped to scooters and motorcycles. Also, it's part of the social development or the economic progress of the country. The country was progressing in a way that people could afford more expensive products. So Luna played a part as a personal mobility enabler at the time when that was critical for India, when India itself was, let's say, growing, people's incomes were, lower, and then slowly they increased, so they could shift to higher products. So this was one shift that happened. And now, incidentally, before I come to the change and the tie-up with Mahindra's, I see that e-Luna, for example, once again has an opportunity, because now we are not competing with a petrol customer going from petrol moped to scooter motorcycle, but because e-Luna has an EMI of just 2,000 rupees a month and no fuel cost, it's now a comparison between somebody owning a petrol moped, a scooter or motorcycle, spending 3,000 rupees on an EMI, and again 3,000 rupees on fuel. So total cost of ownership is 6,000. Vis-a-vis the e-Luna, where the total ownership cost is just 2,000 because there's no fuel cost. So once again, it can become a personal mobility enabler. Today, incidentally, half of India does not own a two-wheeler.
Yes.
Because their income is between 15 to 25,000 a month. So after spending for roti, kapda, makan, they may have 2,000-3,000 rupees as the transport budget. So they can't afford to buy a vehicle. Because again, if you bought a petrol vehicle, you spend 6,000-7,000 rupees a month. But they can once again consider a e-Luna because the total ownership cost is 2,500 or below. So once again, Luna has become relevant, incidentally, because of the e-technology, but more about that later. So I would say that there was a shift in the society in line with the progress of the country. So what we did was we actually joined hands with Mahindra Group in around 2007. The idea being that we wanted to add motorcycle as an opportunity to the Kinetic franchise. They were very keen to get into the two-wheeler business, the Mahindra Group. So we felt that our scooter business and Luna business, which had by then reduced because the society had changed, and motorcycles brought by the Mahindra family with their rural network, with their brand, could be a great way to combine strengths of the two groups. So we did a strategic joint venture with the Mahindra Group and formed a new company where we were partners, and the idea was to build a new motorcycle business. So we kind of restructured the business. The other thing that we did was we found that our core strength always was engineering. So a lot of our group companies, which were also pioneers in their own way, making gears, making engines, making starter motors for our scooters, electronic components, they had been captive group companies supplying to Kinetic. They pivoted and became independent automotive systems companies, now using their expertise to supply to the whole industry. So we did two pivots. One was our engineering systems companies, automotive component companies became independent players, which are now today, generating more than 1,000 crores top line. And our two-wheeler business, we thought that if we partner with Mahindra or a partner like that can play in the motorcycles segment, which was the last segment then. So that's how the group was restructured.
Superb. And obviously now you are trying to revive the Luna legacy with the e-Luna. But before that, a little bit, maybe a personal question. So how do you see yourself, obviously being a part of the Firodia family and taking on a family legacy and trying to rebuild? I'm sure it's difficult, it's scary at times. But also, on the other hand, being a woman in the automobile sector, how does that play in your mind?
So Kinetic Green really is a product of passion and purpose. And I think this answers your question both ways, that we exited the JV with Mahindras in 2014. And I was thinking that what is the new direction the group should take? And also what can I do to kind of add to the legacy of the family? I'd been part of the group then for almost, I came back from the US in 96. So I'd been part of the group for almost 20 years. And I felt that, now it's time for me to do something which is my own signature, adding to the legacy. And that's when I was traveling around the world in US and China, Bangladesh. I started experiencing EVs and I felt that this is the future. And these are early days. There were more non-believers than believers in EVs. It was not fashionable to be an EV company at all. But I felt convinced that EV is the future. And for many reasons. One is because the world is going green. Young generation is making sustainable choices. And my grandfather always told me that if your business is aligned with the mega trends of the society, half your success is guaranteed. So if the world is going green, I feel that even transport has to go green. It cannot just go green on the fringe. And every time a new emission norm was coming, I saw that the ICE technology was becoming more expensive. Engines were becoming heavier, less fuel efficient. Cost was increasing. And it was kind of, struggling to become truly green, to reduce emissions. But electric was genuinely, naturally green. So I felt that this can be a disruption, which is truly green, in line with the sustainable choices that the society is making. And it is designed in a way that it can be cost effective while being green, which ICE cannot be. Because if ICE tries to be green, reduce emission, then the cost is going up. So that is not meeting the requirements in terms of, the long-term sustainable approach. And then third reason is that young people today are used to gadgets. Your phone, your iPad, your, everything that you use is a gadget. And EVs are like a tablet on wheels. It is the most intuitive. It's simple to use. You can customize things. It can be easily a connected product. It can more easily become an autonomous vehicle. So I felt that this is a technology of the future. And that's how I wanted to start Kinetic Green.
Yeah.
As a way to add to the legacy of the family, have my own signature on it, in my own way, add something to this wonderful legacy. And I always tell my team, that when the future of the Kinetic Group and the Floda family will be written, the green page will belong to us. We have to make it glorious. So it's with that purpose and passion that I started this business. And there's been no looking back.
So I find it quite amazing कि 2014 में you were thinking कि हम EV का business बनाएंगे.
Yeah.
And so what was your thought? ठीक है, maybe you spoke about the macro trend of the society, but in terms of numbers or in terms of adoption, did you have something in mind कि ये क्या बन सकता है?
So I felt it was kind of, let's say, a thought process that was top down, which was green trend, but also bottom up. I tried to think that where can we apply EVs? And instantly we began with golf carts. We said that, okay, let's get going with electric, with something that everybody knows is electric. And we began working with a partner in China called Marshall, which is one of the world's largest golf cart companies. And we began to, work with them to bring some golf cart technology and started seeding the market, put our brand out there, came up with a slogan, for a better tomorrow. Now, of course, this changed to Planet at our Heart. It's a new rebranding that we've done recently, but began with golf carts. Then I felt that three-wheeler is the more, is the right thing to work on. Also because we had a non-compete with Mahindra till 2020 as we had come out of the JV, so we could not do two-wheelers.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, three-wheelers makes more sense because the TCO is understood by the three-wheeler drivers. They're anyway financing the vehicle. So they know that they have to pay a little bit more EMI, but they'll save every day on the fuel.
Yeah.
Whereas a two-wheeler customer or a car customer does not understand TCO. They want everything, the performance, the features, everything, but they want the lower upfront cost. They don't want to pay more today to save tomorrow. That doesn't appeal to a private user as easily as to a commercial user.
And I'll just clarify to the audience, TCO is total cost of ownership. which includes the price of the vehicle and the running cost of the vehicle, the operating expenses for fuel, maintenance of the vehicle. So if you total that over the lifetime of the vehicle, that's called TCO, or total cost of ownership.
Right. Thank you for that. So in case of a three-wheeler, why is a TCO attractive? Because as I'm saying that the vehicle may cost a little bit higher upfront, but then every day you are saving on the fuel. 400 rupees was the typical cost of diesel or petrol, which you don't have to pay in an electric three-wheeler. And all these three-wheelers are financed. So the EMI is a bit higher. They're not even paying it upfront on cash because the rickshawala cannot afford to pay vehicles on cash. They're always financing it. So a little bit higher EMI, but saving every day, and we thought this was the right way to go about it. Now, again, the family DNA, make in India. We didn't want to do anything which is import and assemble and sell. So I tied up with CSIR, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. They had a program called New Millennium Technologies, NIMITLY, in which they were supporting few new technologies. One of them was EVs. So I approached them and said that I want to make an electric three-wheeler platform made in India, because I believe that electric is the future, and I want to make local technology even at the subsystem level. So that's how we started the project. We put together this electric three-wheeler program with CSIR. There were 3 CSIR labs that worked with us: CERI, which is in Rajasthan, CMERI, which is the mechatronics lab in West Bengal, and SICRI, which is a chemical lab in Tamil Nadu, in Karaikudi. So one worked on battery, one worked on powertrain, and one worked on the lightweighting and the vehicle design. And we involved our group companies, which I mentioned to you, were already experts in engine, transmission, electrical, electronics. And our group company started investing in creating subsystem level EV technology. So one company got into electric motors, which was a motor expert, one into electronics, which was a PCB manufacturer, which forward integrated into EV electronics. And the transmission company worked on e-axle. So we took a holistic approach. KG became the OEM, designing the vehicle, lightweighting along with CSIR, and the group company started developing subsystem level technology. And in 2016, we created India's first made in India ARI approved electric three-wheeler. So that's how the business started.
So make in India. I think, of course, a large part of the vehicles are completely made in India, but there is also a lot of reliance on China, especially for battery components, and perhaps even for motors and controllers. So how do you see that? Do you think India will always remain reliant on China?
So let me first say that if we really want to be successful in EVs, and I would say that I would go a step ahead and say that if we want to be a successful automobile, leading nation in terms of technology and manufacturing, then we have absolutely no choice but to focus on Make in India as a country. Because there is no doubt in my mind that India is going to be a big consumer of EVs. But are we going to be a big producer of EVs? That can only happen if we focus on Make in India. Otherwise, we'll just end up becoming an importer of EVs. Something similar that has happened in, let's say, solar.
Yeah.
Where, China has dominated the world on supply chain, or in semiconductor, where your nations are dominating the supply chain.
Yes.
In case of EV, I think our government has shown foresight and has also made policies which are promoting Make in India. Whether it is the, FAME scheme, which had stipulated very aggressive, local content, whether it is the PLI schemes. So I think there has been a push towards Make in India, and it's with a vision that if we don't focus on it, we'll end up being only consumers and importers, but not producers.
Correct.
So it's very, very important. Now, how do we further reduce the reliance? So I would say that right now vehicles are now made in India. The time of China imported assembled kits has ended. That's become a very small fraction of the EV market. Thanks to regulation, thanks to schemes like FAME, people have to localize. Component makers enthused by that have started developing, the subsystems. I think we are also now coming to building reliance. So mechanical parts, India is already strong. There's a large auto industry, so EV is not a challenge. Electrical, electronic parts, I think we are seeing more and more now supply chain depth coming in. They're still more expensive because in China there is mass production. So electronic and electrical parts are much cheaper. Indian parts are more expensive because people are amortizing investments over lower volumes. But I'm hopeful that, over the years, it will reduce. So far, the government incentive scheme like FAME was helping us to offset that. As subsidies come to an end, it's absolutely imperative that the Indian supply chain becomes cost competitive. Now coming to the next level, where at the tier 3 level, which is the magnet inside the motor, which is still being imported from China, or the cell inside the battery. Other than these two, I think a large part of the supply chain is now localized, or the semiconductors, that's the other thing. I think that the government has now started pushing towards localizing the supply chain. For cells, there is already a PLI, and there are some large players who have begun the process of local cell manufacturing. There's also innovation that's being looked into as to alternate chemistries, and I think over the next 2 years or so, India should see a higher self-reliance on the cells. Magnet obviously was not a focus. Suddenly it has hit the whole sector because China has put the brakes on export of magnets. So we are waking up to this rude reality that something needs to be done. Right now, I would say that the sector is scrambling, trying to find solutions. But now that has also brought focus on, trying to find longer term solutions, which may take some time, but it will come. Okay. So I think that we are working towards Make in India for EVs, EV components, subsystems, and now also supply chain. So I think we're working in the right direction.
And the kind of scale investment that we see in China, like, we've seen a lot of images of BYD plant, etc. Does Kinetic Group ever think it will become that big, operate at that scale?
So I think we have to play to our strengths. What are our strengths? India is the world's largest three-wheeler market.
Yeah.
India is the world's second largest two-wheeler market. Yeah. Now India is the world's third largest automobile market if you combine all the segments. I think this is a big strength. And I think our Indian companies, our government, everybody has to play to this strength. That if we can, and that's what China did. They pushed EVs as mainstream into China. So everybody started using EVs. The government pushed the policies. They brought in the mandates. Only electric two-wheelers were allowed in the cities. For cars, the government gave huge incentives, subsidies to support the electrification. And that's why now more than half of Chinese cars are electric. And they've also become exporters because they have brought the scale, as you rightly said. So I think India can do the same. We have the scale advantage. So companies like Kinetic, of course, we are having ambitions to have a large-scaled operation. We want to sell not hundreds, thousands, but millions of vehicles for the Indian and for the global markets. And our local market is the great advantage. Definitely, we do need to be supported by continuation of government policy that remains, keeps EV in the forefront. जो दिखता है वो दिखता है समीर. So if more EVs sell, more EVs will sell. People buy automobiles based on word of mouth. So we are still only at 6-7% EV penetration. So they say we are well begin, but definitely not half done. So they still need to create demand. If we create more and more demand through the right policies and more EVs sell, more investments will come, and companies which are good can scale up and become large players.
So we need now mandates on EV adoption and more support for local manufacturing.
Yes, so I believe that, we have to attain critical mass, right? So how do you get critical mass? By generating demand. If we become as a country 25-30% EV, then the ecosystem will devolve, charging infra will develop, component companies will confidently also manufacture components. So we still are not there yet. So I think that, of course, right now there is a thought process that incentive should be discontinued. Kya zarurat hai, no? But I do believe that not for the manufacturers, but for the customers to find EVs attractive, I believe that incentive should be continued for another 2 years till we get to 20-25% EVs, even for two-wheelers. We become more EV for cars, trucks. Secondly, mandates. CAQM recently in Delhi has brought a mandate that the fleets, the delivery fleets, should have only green vehicles. Similar mandate should come. In polluted cities, only electric three-wheelers should be allowed. We went from diesel to petrol to CNG, so why can't we go to electric? Our government should encourage procurement of EVs for their fleets. Defense should buy EVs. So I think mandates, large-scale procurement will and continued incentive will drive demand. If demand comes, everything else will follow. If demand doesn't increase, then it's like a reverse gear. Because if you're not selling, then you're not making. If you're not making, then nobody is investing. So I think we still are not at the critical mass. So for the sake of our country, I think we have to push, on this green transport to attain critical mass so that we remain an important player in automobile sector in the world, and we reduce pollution in our countries, and we become non-oil dependent as a nation, which are the three large goals, with which EV will contribute to our country.
So I think now electric two-wheeler market is becoming fiercely competitive. So I want to borrow a line from one of your competitors. He said, "Ola तो ओला है, चेतक तो शोला है, तो लूना क्या है?"
So सबको तो ये मालूम है कि चल मेरी लूना, which means that Luna is a product that can enable transport and movement. I would add to it that Luna chalti hai.
लूना चलती है.
What I mean by that? I mean is that, so far most of EVs that you see on the market are made for a certain kind of urban discerning clientele. These are scooters, high-end motorcycles, costing 1,25,000 and above, 1 lakh and above, and made for the cities, right? I mean, you see the products are more suitable in a Bangalore or in a Chennai or in a New Delhi. But what Luna has done, and I think what makes it unique, is that Luna kahin bhi chalti hai aur kisi bhi kaam ke liye bhi chalti hai. So it's a vehicle that's suitable for urban and rural markets, making it unique. It's got big ground clearance, large wheels, very sturdy build. It can run, on the bad roads in our villages. And we see that there is a large segment of Luna buyers who are farmers, and milk delivery, entrepreneurs are finding it to be a reliable solution. Second, Luna can be used for personal use as well as for delivery. We can carry 8 big basket crates, 150 kgs on it. Chalti hai fir bhi. No, it's suitable. It can be suitable for fixed battery and swappable battery. So chalti rahegi because you can keep swapping the battery. So it's a unique product which we've created for urban and rural India for personal and delivery use. So we can say it's for India and it's for Bharat. And I think that's what is unique about it. There is no other EV today in the market which is so versatile and which can really, make India mobile. And as I was telling you before, the total cost of owning a Luna is only 2,500 rupees a month. But Luna will also make people earning 15,000 to 25,000 rupees, which is half of India, mobile. So वहाँ भी Luna चलेगी.
So I guess price, practicality, and reliability of that vehicle, especially
versatility, suitability. So we say Luna में E is for electric, E is for everywhere, E is for everyone, E is for everything, and E is also for emotion. क्योंकि वो जो Luna, evokes that personal pride, चल मेरी Luna. So that's all the E's of Luna.
Wonderful. So you started by saying कि two-wheeler adoption will be 70-80% in the next 5 years. तो ये कैसे होगा? What are the biggest hurdles, bottlenecks towards adoption of electric vehicles in India?
So I think that the electric vehicles, especially for light mobility, 2 and 3 wheelers, I'm more focused on light mobility as an imminent opportunity. I think for the next 5 years, it will be these segments that will drive electrification. And after that, it will be cars and other long range.
Trucks, buses, etc.
क्योंकि उसके लिए आपको हाईवे पे चार्जिंग चाहिए, उसके लिए आपको ज़्यादा रेंज चाहिए. So battery technology has to become more and more affordable. So, but for light mobility, you need to give about 100-150 kilometer range. It's always running within the city. Speeds are moderate, 50, 60, 70, 80. So you can offer an EV which has all this at the right price, which is close to the ICE alternative. And that's what's making the electric 3-wheelers and electric 2-wheelers imminently ready for a massive transition. And that brings my confidence. Secondly, I think that the 70-80% will be attained in mopeds and scooters. जहाँ पे EV का experience is same as ICE. आपको जितनी चाहिए उतनी range मिलेगी. जो use चाहिए, जो practicality चाहिए, जो convenience चाहिए, comfort चाहिए, features चाहिए, under seat storage चाहिए, all EV can give you without any change in your requirement. EV is meeting your requirement. You don't have to adapt your requirement for the EV. You come home, charge it, use it all day. So I think people will find it more and more user-friendly. Now, therefore, I'm very bullish about it. Now, what do we need to support this with? As we were saying, government policy has to remain favorable. There should be no U-turn. Suddenly, EV should not become expensive. कि भाई GST बढ़ा दिया, incentives खत्म हो गए. Make in India पे focus चले गया, so people are importing, reliability is going down. So we have to be consistent in policy for the next 5 years. This is number one. Number two, manufacturers have to make good quality products so that people who buy EV give a positive reference. There should be shortcuts on safety. There should be no shortcuts on reliability. Now, I think it's something that we owe to the country and to our consumers. And I think the third biggest is financing. I think आज भी financing for EVs is not as available and not as affordable. This needs to be improved. Definitely, companies like yours, Sameer, you played a great role in making EV financing accessible. But there are very few players like Refin. A lot of the large banks and NBFCs are not really taking that much interest.
So I'm sure you're talking to all the large banks, NBFCs, and trying to convince them. So why don't they get into this?
दो तीन चीजें हैं. एक तो because EV is only 6-7% of the market.
Yeah.
They are earning 93% of the market तो है उनके पास. So there is no dying need for them to take EV seriously. Let's be practical. If suppose tomorrow EV becomes 25%, then definitely there will be a dying need. And then people will look for solutions rather than problems. Today, the prevalent financiers are saying कि नहीं EV में resale value नहीं है, ये नहीं है, वो नहीं है. They are finding problems, but they're not focusing on finding a solution. So they're finding it, let's say, not being focused. This is one. Secondly, there are some genuine aspects where the OEMs and the financiers have to sit together and find solutions so that the financing is, a win-win. Win-win for the consumer, for the financier, and for the OEM. There should be structures like delinquency funds that can help the financiers to support, any kind of excess, cost of repossession. On the other hand, financiers should not expect OEMs to give a backstop guarantee because it's not OEM's domain to take financing risk. So they have to understand each other and find solutions. And I think just to complete, I think last is we have to find solutions which are required for the EV market, which is fleet financing. That's a big opportunity. We've also been working with RBI, telling them to include EV in priority sector lending, which is something that needs to be pushed. So a few things coming together.
So being in the EV financing business, of course, we've experienced some challenges, but we also hear what other larger lenders think about it, right? And you've mentioned some of them. So typical things would be, a product has not lived its full life cycle now. Right? 3-4 years, whether the battery works or not, we don't know. Secondary market doesn't exist. So where will you sell the vehicle at what resale value? Some of the supporting infrastructure, जैसे after sale service, spare parts, charging, etc., is not fully developed. Technology is kind of evolving and changing very, very frequently. And finally, which OEM to work with, right? Because India में इतने सारे EV OEMs हैं. And I know we spoke about this, about building good quality products, etc. But ultimately, right product, to identify the right product, right brand for the right use case with the right OEM, which is going to survive for long and honor all their commitments on warranties, etc. वो भी एक बहुत बड़ा challenge है.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, these are the things that we hear. So, any good examples of how you are helping financiers solve that problem, all of these problems?
Sure. So I think, first of all, financiers' responsibility is to take the risk.
Yeah.
But they have to measure the risk, right? I mean, I think, first of all, financiers should ensure that they are working with products which are giving, good service support, giving warranty. अगर आपका financing 3 साल का है, then you cannot finance a lead acid battery, for example, or a vehicle which has less than 3 years warranty on vehicle and battery, because then you're not covered.
Yeah.
So if your OEMs are giving 3-year warranty, which is your financing period, then you are covered because the OEM is also standing behind the product.
Yeah.
And definitely you have to work with, respected, well-known OEMs where you know that the quality will be there. The OEM is concerned about the reputation and they're not going to run away. If there are unknown brands who have 5 showrooms in one city but no, let's say, huge skin in the game, and if they shut the shop, the biggest loser is the financier.
Yeah.
Because OEM has shut the shop, dealer has shut the shop, but you are left with the customer for the next 3 years. So certainly working with good OEMs who, are going to be there around for long, good quality products, good technology vehicles, lithium-ion batteries will have always longer lives, longer, warranty cycles. Companies who are under the FAME scheme, that means they are using Make in India reliable products. They are required to give 3-year warranty. So I think these are the choices that definitely should be made by the financiers. The OEMs, of course, have to stand behind the financiers. If there is an unpaid EMI, they have to, help the financier through the dealer and ensure that they support. Because if the financiers lose money, they're not going to finance, continue financing in that location. So then you lose that relationship. So I think we have to work together and make the right choices. I do believe that EV financing is not for the faint-hearted, but they also say that fortune favors the brave. That means that today, if you get into EV financing and you get it right, the returns are definitely much higher than ICE financing. So, accounting for the risks, if you make the right decisions, work with the right companies, right OEMs, who are going to be, around for long, I'm sure they can be a gainful solution.
Okay. Also, so one of the objectives of this podcast is to also talk to young potential entrepreneurs. Any thoughts on if some young person today, a Gen Z, wants to build an EV business, maybe sitting in a small town or tier 2, tier 3 town, what is it that they should be doing?
So let me say that electrification actually has truly disrupted the automotive industry. Till 3-4 years ago, till EV kind of started becoming, a real thing, auto industry was very set. There were those OEMs everybody knew. There were the component makers everybody knew. There were the financiers everybody knew. There were the big dealerships which are established in the city. It was not really a place for innovation or even entrepreneurs to come in because everything was set, right? EV has changed all that. I think that EV, in fact, has created a huge set of new opportunities for entrepreneurs everywhere. And, today's Fortune 500 companies or today's, unicorns were yesterday's startups.
Yeah.
So I think today India is buzzing with entrepreneurial spirit. And definitely people should look at this as a new sector where they can create innovative and successful business models. The opportunities are everywhere. They can be in EV component making. We still have a dearth of good suppliers, for innovative powertrain, drivetrain solutions, software, display solutions. It can be in EV fleet management. Again, mandates are coming for green fleets. Customers may not be ready to buy EVs, but if you become a fleet operator, buy a fleet of EVs and deploy it, rent it to the, last mile delivery professionals, there is a good arbitrage. So EV fleets, whether it's 2-wheeler fleet or 3-wheeler fleet, you have today companies like Rapido, Porter, Zip and others who have already showing that EV fleets is a successful idea.
Yeah.
Software as a service, battery as a service, EV financing, charging infra. There are many opportunities that are there. You don't have to become an EV OEM to be a successful EV player because OEM is, as I was saying before, is a very comprehensive, large-scale, setup. But there are many other opportunities. And I think I would just like to say even for women, traditionally automobile has been the male domain. But EV is changing that. I think young women can enter the automotive industry through EV. In our Kinetic Communications, which makes controllers and clusters, we have 100% women on the shop floor. In Kinetic Electric Motor Company, which makes motors for our EVs, we have 100% women on the shop floor. In Kinetic Green, we have 50% women on the shop floor. So with women and EV, you're not only looking at women being only in marketing and finance and HR, they can come in the mainstream of automotive. So I think it's a great opportunity for women to enter the sector as well.
And do you think it takes longer to build a business in EV and sustainability than any other business?
There is, I would say it goes both way. EV innovation is now gathering pace. At maybe in the first 10 years, it was still very nascent. Policy was still being formed. Supply chain was still extremely, nascent. But now it has gathered pace. So now we have gone from nascency to innovation in the sector. And now we are also seeing this disruptive adoption. So I think for the next 10 years, it can be actually a very dynamic and interesting space, which can grow very fast. But it's still early, but not too early. But it's definitely not too late. I think it's a good time to be exploring EV entrepreneurship opportunities. There's a room to innovate. There's a room to disrupt. And I think, we'll see new billionaires that will be born in this EV transition.
Wonderful. And what about technology, AI? How do we adopt that in electric vehicles? Of course, we've recently had Tesla launching in India, and hopefully we'll soon see some of their autonomous vehicles as well. How are you thinking about it, integrating of technology?
So I think AI and, data is very easy to incorporate in an EV because you have more electronic and software parts than you have mechanical parts, unlike a traditional ICE where the whole vehicle is mechanical and the electric is software is a layer that you add on it. In EVs, software is heart of the EV. The controller is the brain and the battery has a BMS. These are software. These are driven by software. So, in fact, we can build in all kinds of things like sensor-based tools for real-time analysis, fleet management solutions, AI tools for remote diagnostics. In fact, we are developing many interesting such solutions in our company as well. We have a large fleet that we run for Domino's of our e-Lunas. And in fact, at all times, we know exactly how many Lunas are running where, how many vehicles are, operating on that day. And the entire data is available at fingertips in terms of number of kilometers, charging, discharging. And we can tell Domino's that, look, in this store, these 3 vehicles are not being run today. I don't think they're charged properly. So that's the power of EV where everything is software.
Yeah.
And we are also developing tools which are very innovative, which is what we call ADIS, Advanced Driver Information System, which is AI-based, where we are studying the driver's pattern and of how much load they're carrying, how they're braking, how they're accelerating, which driving mode they're driving in, how they're charging the vehicle. And we can guide them on how, looking at their own driving pattern, collecting that data, using AI, we can guide them real time as to how they can get better experience from their EVs. So we can tell the customer that, look, you're not carrying much load. So don't drive in the power sport mode, drive in the eco mode, you'll get more range. So EV, because has so much more software electronics, it lends very well to AI and to, all kinds of data sciences. In our golf carts, which we're about to launch tomorrow, in fact, we are partnering with Infosys to develop an autonomous solution. And I think it's for the global markets. Very easy to implement in golf carts because they're running within a campus.
Yeah.
And makes sense because golf carts are fleets. So they can be run as shuttle services. So yes, I think EV lends itself very well for this.
So you'll have driverless golf carts very soon?
Yes, and not only in India but around the world. Let me tell you about the golf cart things. So Kinetic is, of course, our vision for 2 and 3 wheelers has been about democratizing e-mobility. It's been about making EVs for the masses and not just the classes. And we think it's a great opportunity. India being the core market, and then expanding into markets like Africa, South Asia, rest of Asia, Latin America, where I think this vision of democratizing e-mobility, making it accessible, to the society is the right way to go. On the other hand, we are building, and this is all light mobility, right? Small EVs. So motor sizes from, let's say, 2 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt. Now, with the same kind of technology, we have entered into another area of light mobility, which is golf carts. So at the back end, it's synergized. It's a similar technology base, similar manufacturing base, similar R&D. But in the front end, we're talking to a very different customer, which is golf courses, resorts, townships, airports, all kinds of corporate infrastructure, campuses. And it's a global opportunity. It's a $5 billion market. 500,000 golf carts are sold every year, electric golf carts. And there we felt that we should do something very unique because you're talking to a very different audience. And we've signed a joint venture with the Lamborghini family, the creators of, automobile Lamborghini cars, which are very famous. That family has a business called Tonino Lamborghini SPA, where they develop luxury products. So they have Tonino Lamborghini branded golf courses, 5-star hotels, apparels, watches, mobiles, accessories. And they promote a certain Italian lifestyle. And the logo is the famous red shield with the bull, the world's most iconic, logo. We have developed a range of golf carts with them. It's based on Italian design and Indian engineering. So the vehicles are designed in Italy. They will be made in India with Indian engineering and sold globally with the Tonino Lamborghini brand. So I think it's a very unique kind of concept where India made EVs, for the world, and bringing in the lifestyle and design element, which is very fresh.
Perfect. Sulaja, thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting conversation. And I think it's wonderful to actually end on the note that you are now building in India for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.